Coming up today on Find the Fairway Live, Brooks Koepka, is he a Ryder Cup lock? And will Zach Johnson actually pick him? We're going to dive into all things Brooks, and is it really a dilemma getting him on there? And Brooks' way back, how he got his way back on winning major championships again. The Charles Schwab Challenge is this week on the PGA Tour. More tiny odds for Scottie Scheffler, plus 400 to win. Is anybody going to challenge Scottie in the state of Texas? We're so glad to have you with us live on Find the Fairway. Whit Watson from Golf Channel and PGA Tour Live. Whit, I'm glad you have a break here, a well-deserved break, and it gave you a chance to come on here because I've been dying to get you on. Thanks for coming on, man.
I appreciate it. And as I look at myself, I didn't mean to do a Scott Van Pelt impersonation, but this is kind of just how it worked out. I wear glasses. My hair is a little short. So this is not like any kind of stalking thing. It's just kind of how it worked out. But anyway, it's great to be here. I had a great week with the PGA Championship, working for Westwood One, doing post-game shows for them. Hats off to Brooks Koepka. I mean, what a performance. And I'm sure you're going to get into that. But yeah, it's great to jump on with you.
And you can channel Scott Van Pelt all you want. No one's ever going to think that's a negative thing ever. We are going to get into all this stuff, but Whit, I want to start with you because you are a figure people kind of attract themselves to because you've done everything in this business. You're with Golf Channel, you're with PGA Tour Live, you're doing so much stuff. And what I didn't show you before the show here was, you're kind of famous for one thing. Everyone loves your stat cards that you put out here on the PGA Tour Live broadcasts. So
Nice.
what I want to start with here is you diving into this thorough investigation, how you read all this stuff, first of all, when it's so tiny, how long this takes you in your process of why you put down on paper what you put down to be ultimately prepared.
I really appreciate that question, and I'm surprised and I'm flattered. Thank you for asking. So, when I started at Golf Channel in 2010, they had me in the studio, and eventually, long story short, I got moved out to do tournaments, and no one really trains you on how to be a play-by-play host for tournaments. So the person that I went to was Kelly Tillman, who was hosting tournaments for Golf Channel at the time, and I said, how do you prepare? And she showed me a document that was a spreadsheet that she had received from Mike Tirico that had bullet points, data, a lot of what you're seeing on the cards, but in a computer printout sort of fashion. I remember things better if I write it down. So I basically I stole what Kelly stole from Mike and put it into writing. And that is essentially bullet points, quick reference points that I can use during the tournament when there's a slowdown in play. So there are a few crutches you use as a broadcaster: the name of the event, where we are, what time it is, what the score is, etc. And so the upper left card is kind of like the title card, what I call the crutch card. This is where if there's a brief moment or a lull, we're back at the Mexico Open, Whit Watson alongside Lanny Watkins, whoever it is, at Vedanta, the name of the golf course. Something about geography. I always include geography because we play all over the world in golf. So there's one card dedicated to where we are.
It's as if
There's
you're
one
having a
card.
brain fart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you can't assume that the viewer is going to stick around with you for 3 hours. The people are jumping in and out of the broadcast, so you have to kind of play to someone that just tuned in and is going, "Huh, what is this? Where is that?" I'm not.
Mhm.
We're at Vedanta in Mexico. Like, you don't want to do it too much, but you want to do it enough that you're reminding people and letting the new viewer know where you are. And then there's sort of the storyline cards, which is like what's happened this season, what's the history of this event, which differs greatly. Like if I'm at Punta Cana, it's a very short history. If I'm at the Masters, that card is 3 cards long. So it kind of depends on where you are. And it's all just quick reference stuff that I use in addition to the research that Golf Channel provides to kind of keep people updated. I mean, I'm a nerd. Look at it. I'm a research nerd. I love doing that stuff. I love the preparation almost as much, if not more, than I love the delivery of the actual broadcast. So, yeah, that's kind of I guess that's my thing in broadcasting is the cards.
With all the data that's on here, How much of this, what percentage would you say actually comes out of your mouth? I'm gonna guess it's like not even 2/3. I'm gonna
I
guess
would
you don't
say
even use 2/3 of this.
I would have said half.
Really?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
50%. I mean, but as you know, I mean, you do this for a living. It's better to be over prepared and not fire all the bullets than to be caught off guard and not be ready. So my mantra is to never be unprepared. Always be ready. And if half that stuff doesn't make air, that's fine. You know, that's a lesson for the next tournament. You don't have to worry as much about geography or as much about history or as much about whatever. I mean, the upper right hand card on both of those pictures is a summary of the season where I write down who won each event that year and a note about was it their first win, their second win, how many wins was it a playoff, etc. That one actually comes into play quite a bit because you see a player and you may have forgotten that Max Homa won twice already this year. You may have forgotten that Tony Finau won in Houston, and so that little quick reference card actually comes into play quite a bit.
You had mentioned vastly different tournaments, Vedanta and Augusta. Do
Yeah.
you find any tournament more difficult to call than another? Like, is it more difficult to call the big ones? Is it more difficult to call the new and up and coming ones? I mean, have you found anything like that?
That's a good question. I've not had the privilege of actually doing play by play hosting for a major championship on television. I've done polls for Westwood One on radio
Mhm.
at the Masters. But I think that the events that have a longer history are a little bit easier to call because you have quick reference points. You can go back to a player that won at this event X number of years ago,
It's all off the
and
top
you'll
of your
all
head.
yeah, that's all. Like any golf fan would
Yeah.
know that Tiger won Bay Hill, whatever it was, 8 times. Like that's not a hard get. The newer events where there's less history, you're kind of making it up on your own. You're essentially defining its history and you're outlining what the message is from the event organizer. And here I think of Vedanta in Mexico. I think of Punta Cana. I think of some of these newer events where they're just so eager to be a part of the PGA Tour
Mm.
story, but there's no history. So you kind of have to pump up the tourism angle or whatever it is that they're trying to sell. We're good partners. We try to go along with what the tournament sponsor wants us to talk about, and especially if there's no history, that gives us some content, right, to kind of fill the time. So, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that certain events that have a longer history are probably easier to call in that regard. That you don't have to explain to anybody why you're here. We all know why we're in Orlando or Memorial or Colonial or Torrey Pines.
You put these all on social media so people look at them, and next time that they watch you and listen to you on PGA Tour Live or on Westwood, whatever it's going to be, people will have a reference point of what you're saying, and you know a lot of it off the top of your head, but some of it, of course, you got to look at it on paper, and you've got it all down. You're very well prepared. We're going to get right into it here with Brooks Koepka is what everybody's talking about right now, mainly because of the way he kind of shifted the narrative around himself in multiple different ways. I'm highlighting his Sunday major swing here because from 2015 to 2018, on Sundays in majors, the guy was incredible. And then that 2019 season alone, what kind of like was the barrier that changed things. Brooks won the PGA, but he had a horrible final round and hung on to win. And then after that, from 2020 to 2023, 3 missed cuts, didn't have any wins, and look at his scoring average on the final round, a Sunday in majors. Now, we're talking all about Brooks Koepka and how he changed things around. Here's what we really got to highlight. What went right at the PGA Championship? And it's obvious what went right after round one. His iron play got so good, Watt, that he was gaining insane amount of shots on the rest of the field Friday through Sunday. And you look at that first number, the approach, he was losing almost 2 shots to the field in the first round. And everything else on this board is dark green.
I think a large part of that, honestly, going back to when he went through the slump and what he was this last week,
Mhm.
is his physical condition. He wasn't healthy. And I've heard from a lot of people who watched the documentary, the Full Swing documentary, where Brooks talked about whether or not he would ever come back to championship level golf. And one of the narratives this week at the PGA Championship was maybe one of the reasons why Live was interesting to him was because he wasn't sure how long his body would hold out. He didn't know physically
He
if he
said
would
that.
ever be able to play at the same level. Right.
Yeah.
So I think what happened this week, what we saw was that he's healthy. He's still pretty good at golf. And it's a major championship. And he's got a switch that when the stakes are high and the conditions are tough, that's when he shows up. You'll recall he used to say he had a hard time getting himself mentally engaged in regular season non-major events. He used to say he got bored or he just wasn't that into it. Well, you combine that with not being healthy, you're going to play like crap at regular season events. Then he goes to Live, kind of gets rejuvenated, gets healthy, comes back to a PGA where he's won twice and he feels like nobody can touch him. And that's Brooks Koepka. I mean, that's who he is. He never stopped being great. He just switched tours. And that's true for DeChambeau. It's true for Mickelson. It's true for Cam Smith. It's true for all of these players. We had what 3 out of the top 5 at the Masters were Live players, right? And
Reed,
we had
Mickelson. Yep.
right, we had at least 2, if not 3, in the top 10 of the PGA Championship.
Yes.
They
Two.
didn't die; they just switched tours. They're still the same people.
Mm.
They're just not playing on the PGA Tour, and I think that to me was the takeaway from Brooks this week. He's the same guy, but now he's healthy and he's back on a stage that he loves, and you saw the best of what he is.
With Kepka's run of all those majors from 17 to 19, his putter was great. I mean, when he
Yes.
was staring down a 10-footer, you knew there was an 80% chance he was going to make that 10-footer. When you look at the PGA Championship and his numbers, the only day he really did great putting was on Saturday when he made a bunch of long putts late in the round to get that second straight 66.
Yep.
Off the tee, he's hit or miss. Around the greens, pretty good. But what is it about Kepka's iron game that
Yeah.
maybe was that the problem? I mean, obviously he had trouble keeping it in the fairway for those 3 years, but is this the kind of situation where if Brooks figures out the approach game and keeps doing it well, we're looking at LA Country Club, which people were already saying if you're going to pick him in a major, pick him there, not at Oak
Yep.
Hill. Uh,
Absolutely.
I mean, he's not going to be the odds-on favorite. I don't know why, but to me, he's the favorite. I mean, why would he not be?
Yeah, the driver thing, I mean, that's today's game, as you well know, right? It's bomb and gouge. And even with major championship setups, if you look at the guys that finished high at this PGA Championship, none of them are terribly accurate,
Oh,
right? Brooks is not accurate. DeChambeau's not accurate. Rory hits it all over the map right now, and they were all pretty much in contention. So,
no.
the idea that you can grow the rough to a certain level where bomb and gouge doesn't work, I don't agree with. I don't think that's correct. I think these guys hit it so far now that the rough can't outpace the distance. That's my opinion, and I'm sure others would not agree with me. As to Brooks, I think he's kind of figured out how to manage the game a little bit. Yes, he hits some crooked tee shots, but he also hits some incredible recovery shots, and he is willing to take his medicine when it's merited. He makes good decisions at this point in major championships. He knows when to go for it and when not to go for it. And he, for the most part, avoided the big mistake. And at a PGA championship or a US Open, it's not so much making birdies, is it? It's avoiding the double bogey. It's avoiding the 7 or the 8 on the scorecard. And that's what he's gotten really good at, is managing his game to the point where there's not the huge tournament ending mistake. And almost everybody that had a chance to catch him, Corey Connors, Hovland, that fairway bunker at 16 or 17, whichever
16,
one it
yeah.
was. Yeah. I mean, everybody behind him made kind of a fatal mistake at some point during the week, and Koepka didn't. And that, I think, is the biggest change in him.
And we're going to get to the emergence of Viktor Hovland in major championships here in a minute. But before we finish with Brooks, we cannot avoid the topic of Brooks Koepka in the Ryder Cup standings. Will Zach Johnson pick him? Right now, Brooks Koepka is second in the Ryder Cup standings, which is crazy because I think at the beginning of this year, he was 33rd, 34th, something like that, ridiculously down there. And he
Yep.
has two events where he plays this year. He gets a second and he gets a first, and now all of a sudden he is second on the Ryder Cup standings list. So there's two things we have to discuss here. Should Brooks be on the Ryder Cup team? And will Brooks be on the Ryder Cup team? Let's start with should. If he qualifies, which he's going to. I mean, he's going to have, if he makes the cut at LACC, he's going to gain more points and he's already going to be on it. Should he
Right.
be on the team if he's number 2 and he qualifies?
Yes.
I agree.
There's no question. Yes. It doesn't matter. We all saw the very uncomfortable exchange between Brad Faxon and Brandel Chambly on live from the PGA Championship. And Brad's point was, you're not playing for your tour, you're playing for your country. Brooks Koepka is an American citizen who is going to qualify on points for the Ryder Cup. This is not a question. There's no debate. Whether you like LIV or not, doesn't matter. He could not be playing golf. He could quit playing golf tomorrow. And if he qualified on points, he's on the team, period. Otherwise, why have points? Otherwise, the whole thing is a sham. Now, and there's no way he couldn't, the bigger question, not to jump your question, but the bigger question is a guy that's on the LIV tour that's close and has to be a captain's pick. And there it gets dicey because Zach Johnson has a lot of voices in his ear about what, even though it's not a PGA Tour event, it's a PGA of America event, he's going to have a lot of voices in his ear, like a DeChambeau, right? Or a Patrick Reed, who's a polarizing
even
figure anyway.
DJ. I mean, DJ's not going to qualify,
exactly.
In your heart of hearts, does Dustin Johnson make the Ryder Cup team better? And how do you not say yes? So if that's the case.
And which player do you take instead of him that you think is going to make the team better? Who that's a PGA Tour member do you think is going to make that team better?
You taking Wyndham Clark just because he won?
I tell you what, I would not want to be Zach Johnson or Luke Donald this year.
No.
It's so sticky and political, and there's so many voices, so many hands in the pot, with this selection process. But to go back to the original question, if you qualify on points, you're on the team, period, end of story. And I think Zach Johnson has already kind of said that. I mean, this week he was asked about it, and he said, if they make their own bed, if they get in on points, then yes, they're on the team. So
he doesn't want to say it, but he's basically indirectly saying it, and he's going to let the point system play out. Koepka's going to be on the team. I don't have a crystal ball, but he's going to be on the team because he's going to qualify. And Whit, it's the exact same way these guys are qualifying for the majors. It's the exact same thing. Pre-existing exemptions of why they're getting in. And if Brooks has a pre-existing exemption, he's going to get in. Now, let's go to Dustin and Bryson. And I don't think Reed should be on the team because I don't think he's the player he was in 2018 and that kind of USA mentality.
Top 5 to the Masters this year.
Yeah, but is it specific to that event? Like, you can make the argument that's why Phil did well at the Masters.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, keep going. All right, I'm listening.
So if you're Zach Johnson and Dustin Johnson comes up, I think we can all agree, if you have a negative perception of LIV, which I do, I have a very negative perception of LIV, but my want for the U.S. to beat Europe in the Ryder Cup far outweighs my disdain for LIV. And I'm willing to be a hypocrite and say that you can't come back to the PGA Tour, but please be on the Ryder Cup because USA needs you, let alone the fact they haven't won in Europe in 4,000 years. That's point number one. Point number two, if you're Zach Johnson, it's a lose-lose with Dustin Johnson or maybe Bryson DeChambeau if he plays well at the U.S. Open. Is he willing to maybe have some negative feedback and some guys who don't necessarily maybe like him in the future to get a victory on European soil? Because Dustin Johnson is a man you need to pick if you want to get a victory on European soil. I'm sorry, it just is.
Yeah, like I said, even though it's not a PGA Tour event, I think Zach Johnson's decisions are going to be at least partially driven by his current relationship with the PGA Tour and sort of like for lack of a better word, the good old boy network of how players become captains. You know, that kind of circle of Davis Love and Jim Furyk and Zach Johnson and those guys that sort of rotate as
Good
assistant
couples, yeah.
captains with the couples, Ryder Cups and President's Cups. You know, that's a tight knit group, and it's a group that's very much dialed in with the PGA Tour. And even though, again, even though it's not a tour event, I think the tour is going to have some influence on Johnson's thinking, maybe not directly, but indirectly. And I think he's going to be looking at relationships down the road, not just for that 1 week at the Ryder Cup. As I said,
Yeah.
that's the worst job in the world right now, is trying to be a Ryder Cup captain for either side. I mean, think about, Sergio Garcia is playing in a U.S. Open qualifier as we speak, like entry-level qualifying. I mean, think about all the guys on the European side that went to live that Luke Donald now has to deal with. And maybe that question is a bit easier for the European Tour as opposed to the PGA Tour. I don't know, but go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't think Donald's team right now has anybody in live glaring to pick him. I mean, if you're going to pick Ian Poulter and Lee Westwood, you're looking for glory years of the past and sparking something. They kind of proved in 2021 that those days are gone. I mean, the Lee Westwood, Ian Poulter, and maybe Sergio Garcia days are gone. You could argue that Sergio did so well in 2021 because he played with John Rahm every day. That's a different topic, but I feel like Luke Donald has an easier job, way easier job than Zach Johnson. Zach Johnson's is in a lose-lose situation.
You're probably right about that. Yeah, the American side is a lot more complicated, a lot more political, a lot more, as I said before, you're looking at not just that week, but what happens down the line after you make those decisions. What's the outcome? What is the overdraft of making those decisions? So yeah, tough year to be an American Ryder Cup captain.
We will see what Zach Johnson does by the time the point standings and the top 6 are figured out at the end of August. One of the guys on the European Tour who is not going anywhere on the European team, Viktor Hovland. And man, I'm telling you, I am impressed with the way Viktor Hovland has suddenly turned around his Sunday major moniker of plummeting down the leaderboard because he, quote, can't handle the pressure. And what we're doing here is we're looking at the last 3 majors, all of them. Viktor Hovland was in the mix on Sunday afternoon. Started the Open last year, tied for first with Rory. Started the Masters this year, tied for third. Started the PGA this week, tied for second. His scores on Sundays, the first 2 majors there, 74 on both. Was not even part of the conversation after the front 9. He plummeted. And that moniker, again, on Viktor Hovland, Whit, is he can't putt, and he can't chip, and he can't play out of a bunker. And you kind of saw that with shots gained around the green and putting at the Open and kind of at the Masters. Not terrible at the Masters, but that's been the nail in the coffin for him. And now all of a sudden, he turns around here at the PGA Championship, and the guy was impressive. If not for Brooks Koepka, Viktor Hovland had this thing won. If not for a once-in-a-generation talent, Viktor had this thing won, and his shots gained around the green and putting almost 4 shots better than the field. This is a guy who, yes, he's young. No, he hasn't done well in bigger events in the PGA Tour. He's won smaller events, if that's the way you want to put it. To me, Whit, he's almost like a light Brooks Koepka, a Brooks Koepka light who hasn't done much in these other events, and all of a sudden he's at the top of the leaderboard in majors, and he's figuring out how to play with the best. He's here. I hope he continues to be here. I love his game. I love his attitude. I love the way he approaches everything around the course. The guy has potential to be a massive star. I just hyped the crap out of him. Do you agree or disagree with me?
I agree completely, and I'm going to give you a stat, and I wish that I was smart enough to find this stat on my own, but I didn't. It was the Elias Sports Bureau. So PGA Championship, the Masters, and the Open, those 3 events on that graphic. Not only did he finish in the top 10 in each of those 3 events, he was in the top 10 at the end of every round of all 3 of those events.
Wow.
So 12 consecutive rounds, 12 consecutive days. He finished in the top 10 on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
And he was the only.
That for a second.
I know you know what that means. It means that he doesn't need to get hot. He's staying consistent.
He's already hot. Exactly. He's already hot. But to your point, it's the putting and the chipping, this just describes to you how thermonuclear his ball striking is to be that good, and he can't putt. he can't. He really. You don't count on him to make a clutch putt.
Yeah.
His chipping, he's talked about it. You
Right.
know, he's this close to the Y word, and yet, I mean, look at him. 12 consecutive rounds in major championships. He's ended the day in the top 10. That's stupid. That's
Nobody
sick.
does that.
No one does that. It's
Nobody.
impossible. And yet here we are. So, I mean, you talked about Brooks at LA Country Club. I'll put one down on this kid right here. I mean, he's got, at some point it has to click, right? At some point he's got to make a putt. At some point, whether it's the Open or the US Open or next year's Masters or wherever, he can't miss putts forever. And yeah, the ball striking is just, he's on another planet when it comes to hitting it close.
Exactly. It's going to happen eventually because he's such a great ball striker. That's there. As long as he doesn't go on a completely insane slide of getting the yips off the tee or on the fairway, he's
Right.
going to be there. It's only a matter of time before his putting and his chipping isn't god awful. And once it's not god awful, like you saw this week, he's there. I hope he's
He's there.
there. I mean, it's
I agree.
scary for the Ryder Cup, obviously, but it's so fun because it was him, it was Colin Morikawa,
Yeah.
and it was Matthew Wolff about 3 years ago when all those guys kind of came on the scene. And it was
Right.
like, man, look at these three guys. Like they were the new Spieth and Justin Thomas kind of thing, where it was
Yeah.
like, man, these guys are young. It's going to be so exciting. Now, you could debate on where Colin's future is going. I think he's got a great future ahead of him. There's nothing to say that Viktor Hovland, once he wins, goes like maybe not exactly Scottie Scheffler because that was superhuman, but once he
Yeah.
figures it out and wins, just goes and goes and goes. And you're talking about him winning 5 majors before he's 30.
I think your the correlation between Hovland and Morikawa is important because the issue with both is putting, right? They're
Yeah.
both on a different planet when it comes to ball striking, but they both struggle on the green. And you just kind of triggered a question in my mind that I'll turn the tables and ask you a question.
Hmm.
Which player who went from the PGA Tour to live do you miss the most? Because when you said Matthew Wolff, I thought, oh wow, I was at 3M. I think that was the first tournament that he was. He and Morikawa went down to the wire at that event in Minnesota. My memory's fuzzy at this point, but I remember watching him and thinking, this kid is a total disruptor. He does nothing the way that anybody does anything, and he hits the ball 7 miles and can putt. And I thought he's going to be the next big thing. And then he jumped to live. So, setting that up in your mind, who's the player who went to live that you missed the most on the PGA Tour?
Well, my personal feelings of who my favorite players were, Koepka and DJ, take them out. Okay. I want to take that out of the equation because they're the obvious ones. To
Right.
me, I think it's pretty much a tie between Cam Smith and Joaquin Neiman.
Okay.
Uh, I say Joaquin
Interesting.
Neiman because I feel like Joaquin Neiman is in a similar mold to these young guys that we're talking about.
Mhm.
Really, very similar players in terms of how well they hit the ball, how far they hit it consistently, figuring out the putter. And you could say Joaquin has a better all around game than Morikawa and Viktor Hovland. He's the kind of guy who, and I think he'll be a fascinating topic of study for Live because the moniker on Live is, well, they're not playing enough. Do they really care? They're taking the money. They're going to sail off into the sunset. Joaquin Neiman is the perfect example of will that happen to him because he's young. He's
He's
very
young.
good. Is he
Right.
going to play less? We don't know. Is he going to care less? I'm going to assume no. Joaquin Neiman is a case study that'll be fascinating. What is his career like in majors 5 years from now? Is he even going to
Yeah.
be in majors 5 years from now? Is the question.
It's a huge question for all of those players, and that's why they're fighting so hard about the official world golf ranking points, trying to affiliate themselves with the Asian tour or whoever it is. Because I think these guys, without knowing anything, I have no insight into this. I think these guys were sold a bill of goods that you can come play on a rival tour, make a lot of money, and you'll still get official world golf ranking points. And I think the reason why you're seeing signs of pushback from guys like Koepka and maybe Dustin Johnson's camp a little bit about maybe thinking about perhaps returning to the PGA Tour is because they want to play in major champion. That's all they care about is playing in majors, right? Like They want the chance to add to their legacy. And if some kind of resolution happens between the PGA Tour and Live, which doesn't look likely, but everything is possible, and these guys can play on this rival tour and still figure out a way to qualify for majors, you could see two parallel tracks for a while. I mean, until the Saudis get tired of losing money and decide not to fund this thing anymore, you could see parallel tracks for at least a couple of years.
It's going to be fascinating. We're at the pinnacle of golf excitement, no matter
We
which
really
way you
are.
want to look at it. So
Yeah.
that's a fascinating conversation. Let's move on to the Charles Schwab Challenge this week at Colonial Country Club. A vast array of different winners on this course. I mean, you've got everything from a bomber to guys who just put it in the fairway, guys who were solid all around. You got two live guys on there actually with Jason Kokrak. Charles Schwab Challenge typically has a good field, and this week it does. It's not the biggest field on tour by any means, but it's after a major. It's before another designated event with Memorial coming up next week. So, picks and predictions for the Charles Schwab Challenge. Let's start with Scottie Scheffler. Every time I have this conversation with anybody, Whit, it's, well, Scotty's got to have an off week eventually. He had a big week last week. He's grinding. Something's got to give. He's going to shoot 75 somewhere, and he's going to fall off the leaderboard. And then, okay, Thursday, I did okay. Friday, he's not going to pick it up. Saturday, up there he is. Sunday, is he going to win? Every single week this happens. So what's the deal with Scottie Scheffler this week?
Do you know what his worst finish is in calendar year 2023?
Oh my gosh. 17th?
T12.
Oh my gosh.
That's his worst finish in 2023.
Where?
He doesn't get. It was. I'll have to go look it up.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Genesis.
Oh, okay.
It was L.A. Yeah, L.A. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't get hurt. He doesn't have a bad day. Occasionally, he gets beat by someone who shoots a lower round,
Which is golf.
which is golf, right? He doesn't lose. He gets beat. He has good days every day. And I don't know. I mean, if John Rahm didn't exist, we're talking about Scheffler as the best player in the world right now. And it's not even a conversation. It's a hands down.
We're talking about him being Tiger Woods, like one step down.
It's ridiculous. Ridiculous how good he's been. But Rahm has been kind of equally good, minus Rahm has missteps. Rahm has bad weeks. Scheffler doesn't really have bad weeks, and I don't know how to describe that other than he seems to be unflappable. He never gets bothered. He's never out of sorts, never angry, never mad, never pissy with his caddy. Like, he just kind of is a steady Eddie kind of guy who happens to be a really, really good ball striker and a very good putter, which is a good combination to have. The skies. I mean, I think he's a favorite every week he goes in. I don't know how you pick against him, no matter what the event is.
2 11ths and a 12th, by the way, to answer your question. Those are his worst. Those are his only non-top 10s. 2 11ths and they were
the worst. Right.
Yeah,
Genesis. And it was Genesis. Am I
Heritage,
right? Yeah.
Right. And American Express. So only one of them wasn't a designated event.
That's his worst, America. Yes. Listen to us. His worst finish in 2023 was a tie for 12th on the PGA Tour. Do you know how hard that is? To not miss a cut? To not have a random 75? Like, that doesn't happen. That's impossible.
He's plus 400 at an event with a lot of good players. Plus 400. It's not John Rahm at Vedanta, where Tony Finau is the only threat. I mean, this is Colonial Country Club. And what I want to kind of highlight here with you, Whit, is so I'm going to compare Colonial to RBC Heritage at Harbor Town, just because I want to
comparison. Yes.
I want to look at similar courses, because not a lot of these guys play Colonial a lot. So you don't really want to go on course history much. It's a weird week at the PGA last week. So comparing shots gained at the four best odds makers here: Scheffler, Spieth, Finau, and Hovland. Colin Morikawa was right there too. Do you take any kind of reference point of similar golf courses, or is this just a crapshoot and you throw all this out the window? Because you'd say Jordan Spieth's probably the guy you'd want to pick here, but the injury, everything. Do you use course correlation here, or do you throw that out?
So in my experience, and I'm not well versed in the gambling aspect of golf, but I generally think of horses for courses. So I know this golf course in Fort Worth. I've done that event several times. You don't have to hit it long. It's not a long golf course. It's a premium on accuracy off the tee and proximity on the greens. So I would look at those two stats if I were, trying to predict a winner. I'd look at driving accuracy and proximity as the key figures. Hovland um, makes me pause a little bit because there are some subtleties on the greens at this golf course. They're not terribly hilly. There's a lot of grain. There's not a lot of up and down, but there's a lot of break, I guess is the way to put it, if that makes any sense.
You just picked
Um,
Scheffler, by the way.
yeah, I know. As I said, how do you not pick Scheffler anywhere? But this to me it's a Kevin Kisner golf course. It's a Kevin Na golf course.
Uh,
It's a Jordan Spieth golf course. It's guys that can manufacture shots that don't have to hit it 370 off the tee. That's who I like. Kind of the smaller stature players who can do things creatively. From my experience, that's who contends at Colonial.
Finau, I mean, for the great player that he is, throw out last week at the PGA. It's a unique setup and unique conditions. Throw all that out. I really hope Tony Finau continues his success. This doesn't seem like a course for him. Victor Hovland, the same thing. Victor Hovland's going to be interesting, though, because what's his mentality? Is he got that killer mentality after wanting to win last week? Does he turn around and do well, or is he waiting for LA Country Club? Who knows? Jordan Spieth, I mean, is he as injured as we feel? Because it kind of looked like he wasn't.
It looked like he wasn't, and this is an event where obviously he has a lot of hometown support, being a Texan himself, and it's a course that really fits him because he can, like I said, make shots and make putts and whatnot. I was a little surprised that he played as well as he did last week because the
Mhm.
news heading into the PGA Championship sounded rather dire. It made it sound like he might
Definitely.
have to take a couple of weeks off, and then suddenly, boom, there he was, and he makes the cut on the number. But
Yeah.
anyway, makes the cut, and didn't look terribly hurt. So, I mean, the game is better when he's healthy and playing and in contention. So I hope he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Colonial this week, Memorial next week. The things are moving on and on. It's fun and exciting times. Whit, thanks so much for coming on Find the Fairway live here on a Tuesday morning. I really enjoyed it. So you're going to get 2 weeks off.
Yeah.
Can you tell the viewers, without diving into any personal details about your life, we don't want you to do that. What are you going to do for the next 2 weeks? What are you going to enjoy before you go up to Stamford, Connecticut to do some Golf Channel stuff?
I may go hit a few balls, try to get back. I haven't played a lot of golf this year because I've been a little bit busy, and my daughter is home from college for the summer, and she's working and staying with us, so we'll catch up a little bit. And
Where'd she go?
yeah, she goes to Boston University,
Oh, nice.
and despite my best efforts, she's a film and television major. I tried to talk her out of it. I tried to get her into something respectable,
Stable.
and she wouldn't listen to me. So yeah, she wants to make movies or be a script supervisor or a script writer,
That's
and she's
cool.
very good at it. Yeah, it's very cool. So she's with us, and then my son is a graduate student at the University of Virginia, and he's going to come home for a couple of days in July. So it's casual until it's not. We have a couple of weeks that are kind of quiet, and then things get busy again. But
Yeah,
it's all good.
everyone's following you on all of these platforms, whether it's Golf Channel, PGA Tour Live, Westwood Radio. Whit Watson, thanks so much for being with us live on Find the Fairway.
My pleasure. Cheers.